First, a little something to soothe away the next 60 minutes, the best from the BBC's film and video collection presented by Chris Searle.
Hang on, just a minute. Stop. I'm sure it's not time for that yet. No, it's not. Look, that's not supposed to happen till the end of the programme. I tell you what we'll do. Let's go back in time about an hour. Whoop, 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 whoop. Hello, welcome once before to Windmill. Again, before, and again. Hello. Anyway, actually, we're going to see quite a lot of that sort of thing in this week's rummage through the world's largest film and tape library. With television, you can make time do anything you want it to. Go backwards, forwards, faster, slower. You can make it do anything you want. For instance, we'll be going back in time with one of our star guests, television historian Michael Wood. We'll leap forward to the year 2000 with the Blue Peter team of 1971. We'll compress 50 years of television into 2.5 minutes. We'll find out what happens when you magically make today into yesterday. And we'll discover what happens when time runs out.
Right, it's 25 to. I shall be here, so hurry up, quickly.
And we'll discover how some people say not how, but when.
Farewell, my brother. We meet again when 3 moons come. When the buffalo coat grows long, and the eagle returns to his mountain, when the sun makes long shadows on the desert, and the wind is still.
Right you are then, Chief. 8 for me it is.
All that, and there may be time for more in our Windmill, which, you may have guessed, is all about time. We begin with the dawn of civilization. Well, the dawn as far as television viewers of the 50s were concerned. There was a wise old archaeologist who used to score points by looking at really old things and saying what they were. He was a superstar. The program was a massively popular quiz game, Animal, Vegetable, Mineral, and the archaeologist was the wonderfully eccentric Sir Mortimer Wheeler. The program used to start like this.
Good evening, and dobry večer. I'm sure I've said that wrong, but I have to say it that way because tonight the challenging museum is the National Archaeological Museum of Prague. And we're delighted this is actually happening tonight. Of course, the procedure will be the same as usual. Now, Sir Mortimer.
Well,
what about this little bull?
Yes, there's no justice in this world.
No.
Well, thank heavens we have a navy. I suppose Bohemia has a navy, too. Well, this is a pot in the act of surrendering with its arms right up. It's a lady pot.
Why you're talking about the navy? Go on.
It's a lady pot.
A lady pot?
It's a pot I think of the Neolithic period.
Why?
Because it's too bad to be anything else.
As Sam Goldwyn of MGM said, we've all passed a lot of water under the bridge since then. Time and tide wait for no man, they say, and neither do parking meters. When a driver's money runs out and the little flag comes up saying penalty, he doesn't get a kick at goal, he gets a ticket. The pen of the traffic warden moves at the speed of 1,000 scorpions, and if the place the driver's done his illegal bit of parking in is a busy street in the middle of London, there's sometimes a bit of, well, emotion of a very English kind.
Excuse me, there's no transport there at all. They don't know, is it a ticket?
You do know on this kind of street you're not allowed to be here
We've
more
already
than...
done one load, so we haven't been long, have we? We're only taking around the corner to the other department.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Round to St George's, round here.
Right.
I mean, they've all gone to dinner in there now. We can't do nothing until they tell us what to take, see?
Let us remember, it's a ticket for them.
Yeah, you don't put the one behind us.
Listen in, mate, you're on top of the traffic light.
Yeah, no, over the road.
I couldn't give a monkey what he's doing over the road.
You couldn't give a monkey.
people who start earning a living in this country.
What do you think you're doing there?
I've got three blokes here that don't know what they're doing of. I've got to look at what they're breaking things galore, and I don't know what it's all about.
Yeah.
I've got the responsibility of parking and parking around the other side. I've got the responsibility of keeping the job going properly.
Yeah.
If you reckon that's true, why are you going to complain about it?
I am. I've got your number, everything.
Good, do you want the phone number and all?
I've never had no trouble here loading before.
Yeah.
I've been here for donkey's years coming here, going out.
No, have you heard about the people next door that are complaining?
What, where?
Oh, mate.
Would you like me to write it down for you?
You try to sleep at night now.
Right, you do realise you're not allowed more than 5 minutes on a single yellow line, don't you?
I don't... Go away, you've had your 6 quid's work, you get your wages this week.
Mate, it's mine.
Well, yeah.
You
go
park on
away.
top of the lights, what do you expect?
No, you still got to live with someone, ain't you? You've got to go and sleep at night, haven't you?
Yeah, my house connection is be a traffic warden.
You're so smug about. Well, I sorted that guy out all right, didn't I? Everything I learned in training just came flooding back. I never thought I'd remember in a real crisis, but I did.
What was the problem?
He wanted to know the time.
It's a tough life for the police, isn't it? Now, from the present, we take you into the future. Not science fiction this time, that comes a little later. This is a clip from a program which is thinking about the future. Blue Peter in 1971 was presented by Valerie Singleton, Peter Purvis and John Noakes. They decided to plant a time capsule in the front garden of the television centre to be opened in the year 2000. Now, if Blue Peter is still running then, viewers will be really interested to see what Val, John and Peter put in their sealed box.
In the year 2000, we do hope that Blue Peter will still be continuing, but Val, John and I almost certainly won't be in it because we'll be far too old. So we thought we'd like to leave souvenirs of what we were like and of what the programme was like here in 1971. And here they are.
Well, we've got a card here with our badges on. We've got the Blue Peter badge here, the one that we wear, the very special gold badge, the silver badge and the Blue Peter competition winners badge. We've also got a tin of film here, and this is actually the air race that you've just seen in the programme which Johnny took part in, so they can see that in the year 2000. Oh, I'm out of breath. We've got a photograph album here. Inside, pictures of the three of us, me, John, Peter. We've got a complete set of our mini books here, 8 of them all together to go in there. We've got
Peter, you're not going in.
our latest Blue Peter annual, the last one that came out, the 7th one. And because 1971 was a very important year indeed, and we went decimal, we've included a set of the decimal coins. This week's Radio Times, so that on Monday and Thursday, of course, you can actually see the times that Blue Peter appeared. We've got a complete history here of Blue Peter with the ship, and again our names, the paw marks of the animals down here, and all the history here carefully typed out. And finally, a tape, and the tape actually has our signature tune on it. It has Jason meowing, it has Petro barking, and it has all of us saying hello.
So we'll say goodbye to that and put the lid firmly on, isn't it?
Okay.
And first I'll seal it with this piece here. Lock it at both ends firmly. That's right. Right.
Oh, nice a mechanic you are with
Oh, I am. I thought I was very good with that. Get it. Right, let's get that rocking up there. There we are.
Okay.
There it goes. Oh, beautiful. Right.
Right, I've also got a plaque here. This is the Blue Peter tree, planted 7th of June 1971 for the year 2000.
So if you're watching television in June 2000, you may see all those things dug up. You may also see a film in which someone will have compressed 100 years of history into an hour. It hasn't been done yet, but one piece of time compression has been done twice. It's the train ride from London to Brighton. Now, the journey actually takes about an hour, but the magic of television filming can turn an hour into just a few minutes. We've got the whole journey here, part of it filmed in 1953, part of it filmed on the 50th anniversary of the date the Brighton line went electric, 1983.
We invite you now to take a trip to the seaside. And although we're going by train, thanks to trick photography, we're able to rush you from London to Brighton in 4 minutes.
London to Brighton in 3.5 minutes. Well, now from squeezed time to doing time, what the old lags in B-Wing called doing bird, doing a stretch, or, and you may detect a hint of a comedy classic coming on here, doing porridge. That hugely successful series, starring Ronnie Barker, Fulton Mackay, and the late Richard Beckinsale, was about life in the most unlikely place for a situation comedy. It was about life in prison, where time stretches to the horizon. You can't see it because you're behind bars. One of the worst things in jail must be finding things to do with your time. The fact is, people have always been fascinated by the time. Now, the most famous clock in the world is Big Ben, and we've made a surprising discovery about Big Ben. Things are not all they appear. Now it can be told. That's if you believe everything you see on Not the 9 O'Clock News. The clock of Big Ben has been chiming away the hours over Westminster since 1859. But in 1976, disaster struck. Big Ben stopped striking. It took more than 3 months to mend, and when the intricate Victorian workings were back in action, Nationwide asked Glyn Worsnip to climb the 336 stairs of the tower and send them his report.
Big Ben is not well. Anno Domini has taken its toll. He's bonged away the hours and ticked away the minutes through 2 major wars and seen off a whole empire. But on August the 5th this year, he suffered what you might describe as a stroke. The 1¼ ton weight which powers his chimes ran wild. It dropped 200 feet down its shaft with disastrous effects on the clock above. John Darwin, resident engineer at the Palace of Westminster, keeper of the clock.
The main trouble was a failure due to metal fatigue in the shaft of the governor, which is that slide fan on the chiming mechanism. This caused the weights to run wild and to rotate the very large drum, which weighs ½ a ton, so that it went flying through the air, right across the room, smashing everything in its train.
Luckily, the great clock, as it's properly called, is built in 3 sections. There's the timepiece mechanism itself, a separate mechanism that rings the hour bell, and another mechanism which rings the quarter chimes. The bulk of the damage was done to the chimes mechanism. Apart from maintenance, the hands on the other side of this huge glass face have only stopped 16 times in 117 years. Big Ben's just had the biggest medical checkup of his life. He'll be under intensive care from now on. The old ticker's fine again, and every hour, on the hour,
Glyn Worsnip at the top of the tower of Big Ben. It's amazing, isn't it, how we take timekeeping for granted with clocks like Big Ben, digital watches, quartz technology and all the rest of it. It hasn't always been that easy. You go back a few years, like a few hundred years, you find that technology can be very primitive indeed. We've got a few examples here. Look at this. That's an hourglass. It takes an hour for the sand to run from that part of it into there, and you've got to be ready to turn it over and let it go through again. So 1 hour, very primitive. What about this, though? This is a sundial, a beautiful folding pocket sundial. Use the compass inside to find south, and then the pointer in the middle will point a shadow from the sun on this little row of numbers here. Of course, it does depend on A, it being daytime, and B, the sun being out, but provided you've got those, you've got absolute accuracy. And then look at this beautiful clock, this Victorian apprentice's piece. It's called a skeleton clock because you can see right through it. Lovely piece of work. You can imagine the apprentice in some clockmaker's workshop spending hours and days working on that. And on the wall, we've got, I suppose, what must be regarded as the trademark of Switzerland, the cuckoo clock. Well, Johnny Morris once took a trip on the River Rhine, and he found a place in Germany where there are cuckoo clocks by the score. It was a cuckoo clock factory.
But supposing you really wanted to make yourself a cuckoo clock, how would you go about it? Well, it is quite simple. First of all, you are getting a box of cogwheels. And are you putting them in position one after the other? Any old where? Oh, no. You will see you can't make a mistake. I see. That's what makes it tick. Yeah, and that's what makes it talk. Now, you hold everything in position. Yes. And then you put on the back plate, like so. What is the matter with it? Then some nuts in position. There. And then you're making like so. And the clock itself is made in a few seconds. And then it goes to have its cuckoo tacked on. Although nobody seems to know what a cuckoo really looks like. That's never a cuckoo. Here's its dulcet songbox. One and the other. Two tiny bellows that puff and blow every hour on the hour. They're simply riveted in nowadays. That's... And now... In the past, the wooden decorations of the cuckoo clocks were carved at home by the cottagers of the Black Forest. The stag's heads, the hanging hares and pheasants. Nowadays, yeah, you guessed, of course. Some bits are carved, but most of it is plastic. Well, we're getting used to it now. Goes with plastic flowers and curtains, doesn't it? After all, any old cottager can carve a stag's head. It takes precision engineering to make a plastic one.
The clocks seem to have a million ways of telling you the time. They bong, they chime, they warble, chirp, bleep. There may even be a clock which will hit you over the head with a brick. But what about a speaking clock you don't have to ring up? It could happen.
There you go. If you want to buy something special for the missus, depends what it is, doesn't it?
Well, it's brilliant. It's the brand new thing from Japan. It is a Japanese speaking clock. Instead of all the hands and the digital readout, you press a button and it actually tells you the time. It's brilliant.
Well, how much?
Well, it's 20 quid, and I'll throw in the batteries free.
I think I'll manage that, yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah, mate?
A wise choice, mate. See ya.
Thanks, yeah.
What's that then?
It's one of them Japanese-speaking clocks. Clever little devils, these Japanese, aren't they?
Let's hear it then.
Yeah, all right.
As we saw with the 3.5-minute train ride from London to Brighton, there's no limit to the tricks film can play with time. Now, Johnny Ball's Think Again programme collected a whole sequence of exquisite moments in which time is either compressed or expanded. With some help from Bach's Air from Suite No. 3, here are just a few of the library's most beautiful examples of altered time. When watching television or making television programs, time is important. If you don't want to miss Dallas or Play School or your cookery lesson, you've got to be on time. Well, nowhere is time more important than the news. And that's the subject of our peep into the telly business this week. And here I am in the actual news studio from which virtually all the BBC news programs are transmitted. I'm in the company of newsreader Moira Stewart. Thank you very much for joining us as a guest on Windmill. Now, this process of putting together a news program, what sort of things are happening?
Well, when the story actually breaks, a reporter arrives at the venue, and it's a process of trying to get the information back as quickly as possible.
And I guess there's quite a lot of writing going on somewhere as well.
At any one time, there's a complement of at least a dozen writers in the newsroom, and they're feeding you with information.
We've got a marvellous clip here which shows some of that activity that you've been describing. It's from a program called All in the Day, the News.
Joel Compass here in Television Centre. Can I have a word, please, from the back?
Yeah. This whole thing could alter drastically in the afternoon, you see, depending on the size of the demonstration and sort of thing.
I'm inclined to think of a quick blow by Mrs. Muscat now, to liven the proceedings up a bit.
Well, the questions I'm obviously asking you, like on Tesco, were you surprised at the result, bearing in mind the strong criticism that you've been receiving over the last?
Official duty of the day.
Before Mrs. Muscat met the committee, a band of demonstrators marched on the Birmingham education offices to demand her reinstatement.
This is Jennifer Muscat, the Birmingham teacher suspended for her part in the controversial sex education film Growing Up, has been reinstated. A report from Richard Whitmore.
Before Mrs. Muscat met the committee, a band of demonstrators marched on the Birmingham education offices to demand her reinstatement.
A younger and just as beautiful Richard Whitmore.
Dapper, debonair.
Now, that's the input of material from outside, and that's where your story really starts, isn't it? That's where this studio gets very busy. How long before the news do you actually start moving in here?
Usually about 15 minutes, between 10 and 15 minutes, and we're here for technical rehearsal.
Margaret, do you have most of your stills now? Thank you, Moira.
Commonwealth leaders at their conference in the Bahamas have moved from Nassau to Lyford Key, a luxury retreat some miles away, for a weekend of private talks. And the issue of sanctions against South Africa is again expected to dominate the discussions.
I know that you have instructions coming to you through a device that looks a little bit like a hearing aid. What sort of things are they saying to you during the program?
Usually, it's a matter of which story is being dropped.
Will you drop page 6, please, everyone? Page 6, South Africa standby is out. Pat Nigel.
You've also got to have some arrangement where you stop talking in time for the film to start, and that's
Indeed,
not
one is
perfectly lined
getting
up.
countdowns, and in news, we have a count of 5 seconds into a piece of film, and one tries to not have one's voice coinciding with the voice of the reporter on the piece of film.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
Cut Q Moira. Come to scanner 2 next with the change.
The conference in the Bahamas have moved from Nassau to Lyford Key, a luxury retreat some miles away, for a weekend of private talks.
The most important person in the studio actually is the floor manager, because the floor manager is in fact instructing you on when to speak, when not to speak, when a piece of film is coming up, if in fact it's not going to come up, gesticulating wildly. So it's a combination of your floor manager and the director speaking into your earpiece that actually gets you through.
What a giveaway. I don't suppose anybody really thinks you memorise it all, do they?
Indeed, but auto cue is a bit of a mixed blessing, actually, insofar as there are, as you've seen, 3 words to the line on your auto cue, but about 8 words on your script, and the trick is to have your eye fall in the right place at the right time.
The 3 youths killed in the police action 4 days ago when they used shotguns from the back of a lorry. But in the tension and violence that's followed, South Africa's President Botha has shown no sign of softening his approach.
Cut.
He blamed what he called...
Standby in the
It wasn't always like that, was it? Because I know when television news first started, it's a long, long time ago, was it 1954? Then they presented the news in a very different style. And what we've done, actually, we've managed to find from the library the very first television news program ever, and the voice of a very, very young Richard Baker, followed by the voice of John Snagg, reading with just captions.
Here is an illustrated summary of the news. It'll be followed by the latest film of events and happenings at home and abroad.
King Gustav and Queen Louise of Sweden left London by air this afternoon for home after a week's stay in this country. This picture from London Airport shows the Duke of Edinburgh shaking hands with King Gustav, who is with the Queen on the right of the picture. On the extreme left is the King's granddaughter, Princess Margareta.
A military coup in Ghana seems to have been foiled within 4 hours. At 6 o'clock this morning, a broadcast by Accra radio said that a 3-man junta, headed by a colonel in the parachute battalion, had deposed Lieutenant General Joseph Ankara and his 14-month-old National Liberation Council, set up after Dr. Nkrumah's overthrow.
Scotland Yard have just issued an appeal for information about a car connected with an alleged bomb plot. They believe the car, a beige Fiat 124 Saloon, registration number X...
Well, that brings us virtually up to date. Angela Rippon and her auto key.
...caused explosions following a police raid on a Bayswater flat earlier this week.
We often see in this series pictures of Alexandra Palace, obviously, because if you go back far enough, that's where all television came from, certainly where it started before the war. And the last vestige of the BBC was the news. For some reason, they kept it going there right up until 1969, and it was such a big break that Richard Baker and Robert Dougal celebrated the departure from Alexandra Palace in a very special way.
Now is the time to say goodbye.
Goodbye.
Now is the time to yield a sigh.
Yield it. Yield it.
Now the old news is going gay and joining showbiz down White City way. Goodbye, goodbye, we're leaving you, skidly-da, goodbye. We wish a fond goodbye, fa-ta-ta-ta, fa-ta-ta-ta, goodbye.
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 Goodbye, Ali Pally. Why not say it again?
Yes, why not indeed?
Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Richard Baker at the piano, Robert Dougal draped very elegantly next to it, singing goodbye to Alexandra Palace.
Dynamic duo. Inimitable.
Perhaps. Perhaps we should sing goodbye now.
Dare we? No, I don't.
No, I don't think so. No. Moira Stewart, thank you very much for being a lovely guest on
Chris,
Windmill.
thank you.
It takes a lot of skilled people to make a television program, and just occasionally they get caught in the act. And the Windmill Road Library has a few films shot behind the scenes. The filmmakers filmed. Our teams put together a sequence which celebrates the craft of television, going right back to the time, nearly 50 years ago, when the BBC put a steel mast on top of Alexandra Palace. It is now 30 of your Earth minutes since this program ended, and it's nice to be back. I've been doing a bit of time traveling. Oops, careful. It's taken me 200 million light years to get here. I'd have been here sooner, but there's a baggage handlers dispute on Alpha Centaurus. Actually, the idea of traveling in time has fascinated science fiction writers since time was invented. Let's travel backwards in time together to the year 1969. Our beloved Time Lord, Doctor Who, looks very much like Patrick Troughton. It's the last episode before he looked more like John Pertwee. Now, Fraser Hines in a kilt, Wendy Padbury and the Doctor are in a bit of a pickle. They're trying to escape from a force field generated by the other Time Lords, and they must get back into the TARDIS. They must get back into the TARDIS. Jackanory Playhouse had their own junior version of time travel. The horrid witch, Maureen Lipman, thinks she's getting old, so she breaks into the master clock of the universe. I told you it was junior. Now, the man in charge is Old Father Time, Geoffrey Baildon, and each date, I've started so I'll finish, is operated by a different person. Now, in this case, it's February the 28th, and it's operated by F28, David Wood. The beastly witch manages to persuade the gullible F28 to put the master clock into reverse, with spectacular consequences.
Well, go on, switch on.
No, no, no.
Yes, yes, yes.
There. Huh?
It's working.
Once it gets going, it'll go backwards very fast, so we won't waste too much time.
Oh, good, good, good. Well, come on in then, young old man. Come on in. See your precious world now.
Oh, disaster. Oh, no. No.
Oh, that's clever. Oh, I wish I could do that.
Oh, can't you be quiet? Can't you see the confusion you're causing your own hand?
I don't care. It's working. I'll soon be young and beautiful again. Isn't it fun?
Fun, it's chaos.
Yes, I know. Younger than springtime, I'll be softer than sunlight. I'll be. I'm 21 today. 21. What is it? What's gone wrong? Why is it stopped?
It's midnight.
What do you mean it's midnight?
It's the end of February the 28th, going the other way, if you see what I mean. You'll need F27 now if you want to run backwards any further. You see, this desk is only programmed for one date at a time.
There's one epic 85-minute play, probably the best time travel play of the past 10 years, called The Flip Side of Dominic Hyde. Now, it's hard to do justice to it in a couple of clips, but we're going to show them anyway. First of all, picture life in the year 2130. Dominic comes home from his day at work. He's a roving reporter, not roving from place to place, but from time to time. He can go to whenever he wants. In 2130, people talk slightly differently, but just like now, he comes home to his wife to watch TV and talk about his day in the past. Notice, though, they're watching a very special television. It's three-dimensional.
Easy day?
I call a waste of time. I think I'm being censored.
What have you done?
Nothing. Watch people in lines, wait for buses which come three together, fill up, travel past more people in lines, in the rain. Wait for buses which have not left the terminal. Who is amused by all this, and why am I sent to record it?
It's interesting. It measures our progress.
Your work is interesting, with Tom Cook. You have variation with sightsee tours. Where did you go today?
Olympics, 1936. Strange happening. A traveller started banging his head on the window. He cried, "Let me out."
Why? Did you want to compete?
He was 97. We had to put him to sleep. Why did he want to join disordered time?
Perhaps he had something to go back for.
When Dominic returns to the past to 150 years ago in 1980, he finds some things have changed. He's learnt that money is peas and quids, but girls still like going to restaurants, and there's a familiar-looking television set.
What are you, for God's sake? Tell me. What are you hiding, Mr. Hyde? Gilby. I don't even believe it's your proper name. No one's called Gilby. It's a brand of gin.
What do I give?
You give £14.96p, including VAT minus tip. Oh, we'll give it together.
No, I have the peas. Quids this time. Now I must go.
Where?
Home.
Aren't you going to take me home?
Not for Mrs.
Who says? Great Aunt Mavis.
Yes. Goodbye.
Gilby? Will I see you again?
I hope so.
Excuse you, going?
Wait for me!
Well, now it's time to turn the tables on you and show a film which was never intended for television. And we've tracked down a remarkable homemade documentary which captures a turning point in history. It was shot at the height of the Depression in 1934, when there were 2 million people out of work. The population was only 46 million in those days. It was a time when great changes were happening. Adolf Hitler had just become Chancellor of Germany, and while millions of people struggled to feed their families, the rich somehow managed to carry on their luxury life as if there was no depression at all. Now, we've added a song to this film, also from the 1930s, by Noel Coward.
Hooray, 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 winter is on the way. There are bad times just around the corner. There are dark clouds hurtling through the sky. And it's no good whining about the silver lining, for we know from experience that they won't roll by. With the skull and the frown, we'll keep our pickers down and prepare for depression and doom and dread. We're going to unpack our troubles from our old kit bag and wait until we drop down dead. There are bad times just around the corner, the horizon's gloomy as can be. There are blackbirds over the greyish cliffs of Dover, and the rest are preparing to leave the BBC. We're an unhappy breed, and very bored indeed when reminded of something that Nelson said. And while the press and the politicians nag, 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 we'll wait until we drop down dead. There are bad times just around the corner. We can all look forward to despair. It's as clear as crystal from Bridlington to Bristol that we can't save democracy, and we don't much care if the reds and the pinks believe that England sinks and that world revolution is bound to spread. We'd better all learn the lyrics of the old red flag and wait until we drop down dead. I like the story, land of home glory. Wait till we drop down dead.
Well, now we dig literally into the dim and distant past, to times when the only trace of people is a few rocks strewn across a field. There's only one person on television I can think of who can make a pile of rocks speak volumes. And for some viewers, the tight jeans are just a bonus. Welcome our star turn and guest, Michael Wood. It's really nice to have you with us, Michael. What's the secret, do you think, of bringing ancient history to what actually has to be a popular, big mass audience?
I don't know what the secret is, but all I know is that from my point of view, I think that enthusiasm is the thing that you've got to have more than anything else, because in fact, I'll never forget the very first film I ever went out to make of this kind, and taking the cameraman out to Offa's Dyke, and he just stood there in this field, and I'd enthused him all the way there, and he just said, but it's just a grass ditch. What am I going to do with it?
Well, exactly. it is energy and enthusiasm. You've got to know a bit about it as well, but usually your history programs are about periods in history where there isn't very much.
There isn't very much. I think that's the attraction, actually. Because you're trying to conjure the spirits up in a way. You're trying to make the people come alive again.
How can you ever be sure that you're right?
You can't be, and I think you've got to let the audience know that there are problems with the sources. You know, I mean, in some cases, we've only got these fragile things to hang on to give us a clue. It's detective work, really. You see. That's part of the attraction.
We've got an example of that program, the Trojan War, with a reference in this little clip to somebody called Schliemann. Who is or was Schliemann?
Yeah, Schliemann was a German archaeologist, in fact a self-taught archaeologist. He actually was a businessman and a spiv and a wheeler dealer and all sorts of other things. But he's often looked upon as the father of archaeology because it was he who had the vision to go to Troy and Mycenae and these places in Greece and dig up what he thought were the heroes of the legend of Troy.
In this place, the ancients believed Troy had stood. Here, one said, no stone is without a name. I confess, wrote Schliemann, that I could hardly control my emotions when I saw it. Its image had haunted my childhood dreams. But did Helen stand on these walls and watch the heroes die for her? Did Achilles drag dead Hector here in the dust? The wooden horse bring down on the city a whirlwind of doom. I was convinced this was the place, wrote Schliemann. Iliad in hand, I sat and imagined the armies marching to and fro in the plain, the fleet, the camp, the fortress of Troy on Hyssalic. For 2 hours the events of the Iliad passed before my eyes, until hunger and darkness forced me to leave. But did Troy ever exist in reality? And did it stand here?
Will we ever know?
Still not sure of the answer, to be quite honest. No,
I
didn't
wonder.
say that.
Well, from Trojan history to British history and your first series, which was called In Search of the Dark Ages. Now, one of the reasons it's called the Dark Ages, I suspect, is that there isn't very much information.
Very dark.
Right. Now, I know you've chosen for us a favourite bit of yours from it. Now, why have you selected it?
I love the English landscape, and I really love Anglo-Saxon history. It's my, I don't know why, it's just your roots, isn't it, you know? And we were doing this series on famous characters from Anglo-Saxon history, you know, King Arthur and William and all that. And in fact, this sequence was really improvised, because we'd been supposed to be doing something else this day, but we were rained off. And what I was trying to do was to show that you could take a 1,000-year-old document and use it almost as a guide to a piece of landscape today. And you could go around it and follow it, and it would all open up before you. We just went there, and the cameraman held his camera by hand without a tripod and followed into the bush. And of course, there it all was. All these features came back alive.
You can still trace the bounds of Athelgard's estate today, as you can with dozens of these Anglo-Saxon charters of the 10th century, which give really detailed descriptions of the lie of the land. Anyone can do it. All you need is a map, a photocopy of the charter, and a bit of perseverance. And if you do it, you'll uncover all those secret nooks and crannies of the English landscape, which we just passed by today, but with which the Anglo-Saxon was so familiar. The nut tree copse, the rush mere, Titch's farmstead. Now, the charter begins, Erst of März beorge West Weirdum, which means that the bounds start off with a boundary tumulus, and this looks like it. It's a great big dug-out Iron Age burial tumulus. These ancient barrows had special associations for Anglo-Saxons. They put them in touch with a mysterious, exotic pagan past, a race of giants, and that was why they often chose them to be the boundary points for their estates. From here, the boundary points really come thick and fast. Follow the hedgerow right up the hill, and you go past the site of the Roman villa, which was maybe the centre of the estate in Roman times. And then, right on up to the top of the hill, you come to 2 quarries. They're named in the charter, and they're still to be seen on the ground. The boundary then starts to turn northwards
to the farm by the oak trees, and there's still a farm there, and it crosses the Dean, Bram Dean, and then we follow it all the way round eastwards, past Titch's farmstead, I wonder who he was, and crosses the Alton Road and comes to Rushmere. And Rushmere's still there. It's still a secluded little pond fed by an intermittent stream which runs down the road just as it did in Anglo-Saxon times. That's exactly what it says in the charter. And so the lady who owns it has told me today it still does.
Yeah, actually, my friends did laugh at me for assuming that anybody could walk into a field and read an Anglo-Saxon document. But, you know, the spirit was right.
Obviously worked. Now, do you consider yourself a broadcaster first or a historian first?
No, I'm a broadcaster and a journalist. I mean, I've worked in television for 12 or 13 years, you see, so that's a sizable chunk of one's life. So I trained as a historian, but I never went any further with it, although I still have secret ambitions to publish my academic work, and I'll do it one day.
Well, we're going back now to a period where there are very rich records and sources. The original Doomsday Book of 1066, or no, not 1066, 1086. Shortly after the Norman Conquest. Now, that has become the launch pad for a colossal project that you're involved in now. Can you tell us a bit about it?
Yes, in fact, it all stemmed from the Dark Age series that we did a few years ago. When I was working on William the Conqueror, I thought, 1986, 1086, there's going to be this 900th anniversary, and wouldn't it be great to do a series of films that commemorated it, but to do a modern survey to compare with the old, if you like, and to look at work and power and land ownership and the people and see how we British have changed over the 900 years and why, you see. So that was the idea, and out of that, this enormous thing has stemmed with a video disc survey of the country, which will be the most detailed survey of any country ever done.
That's all in the future, well, in the present and the future, but the clip we're going to show from the programme about the Doomsday Project is looking at the original.
It was nearly 20 years after the Battle of Hastings that William ordered the Doomsday Survey in Gloucester at Christmas 1085. He then sent out his commissioners who travelled the length and breadth of England. They were to find out who owned what, how much the land was worth, and how much more could be got out of it. It's an ominously modern idea and gives us a clue as to what the Doomsday Book actually is. It's the record of tax assessments. It's the equivalent of a government central computer today. In fact, one feels that a grasping tyrant like William the Conqueror would have been delighted to lay his hands on a computer if he could have. It might help to imagine the takeover by a multinational company with the board probing deeply into staff and assets and even contractual obligations, because for long afterwards the Doomsday Book was viewed as a register of rightful possession. And one reason why it was done was surely that after 20 years ruling this conquered land, the Normans were driven out of their orderly minds by the baffling variety of local custom and regional law in England when it came to land tenure.
Michael Wood, thank you very much for being such a charming guest on Windmill today.
Great pleasure, thank you.
Well, time's winged chariot has practically run us over. The sands of time are running rapidly to a close. It's time to say goodbye with a song called Time Flies By. It's the end music for one of the most repeated children's programs ever. Chigley, made as long ago as 1969 and as evergreen as ever in its own quaint way. The singer is Brian Kent. Take it away, Brian.
Time flies by when I'm the driver of a train, and I ride on the footplate there and back again. Under bridges, over bridges, to our destination. Puffing through the countryside, there's so much to be seen. Passengers waving as we steam through a station. Stoke up, time and call, the signal is at green. Time flies by when I'm the driver of a train, and I ride on the footplate there and back again. In the cutting through the tunnel, rushing, clanking on the track, wheezing pistons, smoky funnel, turning wheels go clickety-clack. Time flies by when I'm the driver of a train, and I ride on the footplate there and back again.
time coming up to 8 minutes past 12. That's the end of broadcasting on BBC Two for today. And so it's good night from everyone here at Television Centre. Well, everyone else has gone home, actually. There's only me left, but I'm sure if others were here, they'd join me in wishing you a very good night. And don't forget to switch off your set.
Next week, Chris and the team discover love and romance in the archives. The Windmill turns again at 12 next Sunday.